Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 8th installation of the Artemis podcast. Today's podcast comes after the exciting HLS contract selection from just last week, where NASA selected 3 contractors for the new human landing system. And with this presentation is Woog, so I'm going to hand over the show now to Woog, and he'll explain this episode.
So today, we're going to talk about 8 things. The first one being the launch abort system of abort motor arriving at KSC for Artemis 2, the NASA Advisory Council meeting being rescheduled to May 13, EUS development being sped up, HLS contracts. On here, it says HLS contracts coming out soon, so I guess I forgot to update that. Okay. So we're also going to talk about the 30th anniversary of Hubble, electrons photon lunar thing, additional RS-25E orders, and the launch of SLS being delayed and work resuming soon alongside Dragon DM2. So this abort motor for Artemis 2, the mission that will carry astronauts, just arrived, and apparently they're going to do some testing on it. And isn't Artemis 2 scheduled for like late 2022?
I've heard it's September.
2022 or 2023. So
Well,
you're
well,
right.
somewhere
you're right,
between.
It was scheduled for September 2022, but the European service module is way behind, and so that's going to put it into 2023. You're right. But it's going to be early 2023, and really that one, the service module, is the only outstanding object.
So depending on how Artemis 1 goes, we can get Artemis 1 and 2 within 12 months of each other.
Ow.
That would be interesting.
12 months.
That would.
I would hate all the like, haha, SLS got delayed, but then you could be like, SLS launched twice this year, so you can shut up.
Yeah, that would be good. That would be a good.
Launches
Actually, no, there's literally no way it would launch within the same year because of the
2022 versus 23.
Yeah, but
within a 12-month span.
Well, 12 months. I highly doubt that'll be even plausible.
Maybe more like within an 18-month span.
It would be fun though to have multiple
motor here, because
it will definitely be between 12 and 18 months.
For about a year. So I guess so from what I've heard, they're just gonna do some testing on it, I guess. And then they're gonna, when the time comes, it's gonna be assembled with the rest of the parts of the launch abort system, and it's gonna be integrated with the crew module.
We'll need to do full test firings of the Artemis 2 core stage, right?
No, because with Artemis 1, when they were considering skipping the green run, they decided that they didn't actually need to do one on Artemis 2, but they did conclude they needed to do one on Artemis 1. Because that was the first build, that was the first time. So they have to work out all the unknowns before launching. And, when it launches, that kind of is also like a second green run, because it's like green run involves a 8-minute long full duration static fire, and so does the actual launch. So that kind of, both of those human rate the core stage for Artemis 2.
Always got needed to have safety.
Gamer moment.
I think they're working on the launch abort system for Artemis 2 a bit ahead of time compared to Artemis 1, is mostly due to the fact that this is actually a full launch abort system, similar to the one used by Ascent Abort 2. So, I guess they gotta make sure that the contractor, did everything fine and did inspections and things like that, run tests. to make sure that the product is quality. Because like it's a safety feature, and if it's not safe, then what's the point?
Yeah.
Big boom.
Okay, let's move to the next
If it
subject.
ain't safe,
City Epic.
if it ain't safe, you could get an N1. Actually, no, that's super heavy. Turn into an
All right,
N1.
next.
Same thing.
Well, the N1 actually had a successful abort system because one time the rocket exploded and then the capsule just aborted.
No,
What do you
every
mean?
single flight of the N1 had a successful abort. It was the only part of the rocket that ever worked properly.
I'm like, what do you mean one time had an explosion? Like,
No,
Also,
do you mean?
fun
There were
fact about the
4
N1:
explosions.
if they had staged, if on the fourth flight they had staged 10 seconds early, they would have had a successful mission.
Wow.
True fact.
Assuming the second stage worked.
Well, the
didn't.
second stage has a lot
Ooh.
less engines, and I believe was
Yeah,
ground
true.
control.
It has a
Plus,
reasonable number of engines for one.
Yeah. With the N1's engine control system on the first stage, apparently whenever it saw like a minor issue, it would just shut down all the engines. So that's why it kept failing.
Even have engine out capabilities.
Yeah.
It had stage out capabilities. No, wait, no, never mind. That doesn't make sense.
Insta abort
Yeah.
abilities.
Abort life.
Abort engine abilities.
Abort
Abort launch
flying.
pad abilities.
Abort existence abilities. Yes.
Speaking of N1,
Abort
the
surveillance
Russian
abilities.
LK lander actually did make it all the way to space on other rockets.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. The LK actually is a flight-proven spacecraft.
Yeah.
So,
And Leo.
wait a
Leo
second.
proven.
Wait a second. Hold on. I just had a big brain moment.
It's Leo
What?
proven.
Okay, right. So the
Actually,
SLS
wait.
Block
Actually,
One,
it went to
guys, I
geostationary
figured out how
orbit,
to
I
do
think.
a direct lunar mission on an SLS Block 1 that lands and returns all in one mission. Okay, so
What?
the
Okay,
SLS
lander.
has a payload.
Save it for later.
So the SLS has an on-orbit payload of 95 tons, right? Well, so did the N1. So you take the 95-ton payload of the N1, put it on the SLS, and then fly the SLS to orbit, and then play out the entire N1 mission from there, and you can land on the moon and return all in one mission using the SLS. Fight me, Starship.
Imagine not having a way to get from your lander to your actual orbital module without having to do an EVA.
Well,
Well, the 95-ton
And you'd also be wanting Soviets
includes
too.
the ICPS as the payload, and we know
right.
it's
So
not the payload.
you just take the ICPS and Orion off and put on the translunar injection stage from the N1. Everything translunar injection up, you put on top of the core.
So you're trying to tell me that you'd rather have an old Soviet design that has like a 50-50 chance of working rather than say developing a lunar dragon?
This is the way that we can land on the moon for Artemis 2. Okay.
I mean, you could also
we have the LK landers.
or whatever.
We have a bunch of LK landers lying around. We
Move
have
on.
we have so many
Lands
Soyuz
lying
flying
around.
around.
Please
I'm
move
just
on.
saying, we just plop those babies on and we get ourselves a moon landing. Sure, it'd only be a one-person moon landing, but it would be a moon landing nonetheless.
Let's move on.
Hey, wait a minute.
Let's move on.
Didn't the 4B the Saturn 4B have the ability to circularize and go to the moon?
Did you say Saturn 4B?
The S4B is what he meant.
4B,
The S4B did have the ability to circularize and go to the moon. Problem with this is that it weighed way over the capacity.
Definitely.
The S4B weighed even more than the Saturn. The S4B plus Apollo spacecraft weighed more than the Saturn V's LEO payload, and way more than the SLS's LEO payload. So you can't just plop that bad boy on. It's
Okay. So let's move on.
Next topic.
Okay, let's move on. The NAC Council meeting got rescheduled to May 13.
I'll
As
see how
many
this
of
is
you
very important.
previously know, it was previously scheduled for March.
I don't see why this is very important.
Well, with the NAC meeting, you get things like the ESD update, which includes updated schedules, when to expect things, and also a whole lot of, new information and things like that.
Which is basically when they roll out the new launch dates for Artemis 2 and 3.
Well, I'm not sure about launch dates, but it does have schedules for the next milestones.
True. some information on Artemis 4 and beyond.
Well, I know that in the previous ESD, they had information on the Artemis 2 schedules and, when those milestones would be done. And also, they had this list of things that would happen in the green one, although they didn't have a schedule for that.
They should schedule everything.
If you schedule things, it's
Okay.
scheduled things
Now,
get delayed.
okay. Now
Okay,
we're
pull-
up to the
Pull up
interesting
the
part.
renders. Pull up the renders. Pull up the KSP replicas. Pull up everything. It's time
Pull
to rag
down
on Boeing.
everything. What's
It
with
is
pulling?
time to
What's
rag
with
on
pulling
Boeing.
up everything? Why can't we pull down things?
You know what?
What
Let's
is
say in unison.
Why can't
Let's
we
say
pull
in
things from the
unison.
left and the right?
No, let's say in unison. Boeing gone.
Okay, anyway,
No. In unison, we're all gonna say gamer moment.
No.
Yes.
3,
Okay, so the
2,
5.
1. Gamer
Gamer
moment.
moment.
Yeah.
Okay, so the 5 proposals
Time to
were
rag
from
on
Blue
Boeing.
Origin,
Let's go.
Boeing, Dynetics.
Boeing, more like
Best.
booing. But
Oh,
Yeah, so I was kind
this
of
is
intrigued.
the
So like
Dynetics
Blue
human
Origin
landing
was
system.
Blue
Everyone,
Origin had
one
their
at a time,
own
one at a
proposal,
time.
obviously, but they're also part of the national team.
Okay, so the
Blue
highest
Origin is
rated.
using the descent stage for clips, but it's also the descent stage of the national lander.
Okay. So the first one we're gonna look at is the Dynetics one, which got the highest rating. Very good in both technical and management.
I
This
mean,
one's the most
if it got
confusing
an
to me.
aesthetic rating, it would
Kinetics
probably
one
be
looks-
not very high.
Looks to be a simple lander for maybe just crew transportation. It is a one-stage design, so that could have
Stage and
some
a half,
effects
really.
on
Stage
the
and a half.
Actually,
stage and a
yeah,
half
stage and a half.
design because
This
of
is
the
a stage and a half.
drop tanks whenever it's descending. The fact that it only has one stage means that it would have very limited abort capabilities in the case of an engine failure.
Well, I mean,
what-
limited is very different when you're talking about from the lunar surface because you have such a limited amount of gravity and you have no atmospherics. Your abort threshold is much larger in terms of what you can accomplish with even a single stage.
Yeah, I think
Well,
I think
true.
if the normal is firing the engines at like 20%, then you could, if you need to abort, you just throttle them all the way up to 100 and off you go.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like we
Yeah.
can talk night and day about, or talk through the day about. It
Yeah,
was
but we
it was
gotta
like it was like a
separate it.
borderline. Yeah,
Okay, well, the
It,
thing
it
is,
wasn't an actual abort; it was like a test abort.
right.
But they ran through the abort
problem
procedure.
with this thing is that I'm
Technically, Snoopy aborted the Earth.
Oh god.
Still out,
Okay.
still out there. Snoopy finna dipped.
Isn't Snoopy in a heliocentric orbit now?
Yeah.
Yep.
With
Where
a
the other ones crashed into the moon.
Yeah, I would say it was the only one that wasn't impacted. Yeah.
A god dang uneven surface gravity on the moon.
And there's a turd inside there, somewhere.
the
People
floating
have
turd.
too much time on their hands.
My
Okay,
opinion is
Wait.
any human flight system probably has them turd in it somewhere.
The
Yeah,
ISS
they're
has
called
got one.
astronauts.
Oh, that was mean. That was mean.
Was a good
Who
one.
said
though.
that? Delete that man.
Delete that man. Thanos, get over here.
One of
Just
the
saying, like,
main
something
selling
genuine.
points for the Dynetics lander is that the crew module is very close to the surface, allowing for easy access to the moon.
Oh yeah.
Unlike the
But
other
the
ones,
astronauts
where
don't
they're
re-
like either long ladders or like an elevator.
Yeah, like Starship, where you're
That'd
like
be-
so far
If-
above the surface.
You know, one of the other
I would be willing to bet
Elevator
that you
is
probably wouldn't even
on
need
the
a lander to get into that thing. Like, if you just did a pull up,
No,
you'd be
no,
fine.
if you
Nah, just like he probably has one.
Corey Bruno has KSP.
No, the jetpack.
Jim
not-
Bridenstine definitely plays KSP. I bet he does.
I want to see
Jim
that.
does, Elon does, Tori does. Does Peter Beck?
I don't know. Does Peter Beck play
I-
KSP?
I
Gonna
honestly
tweet at
imagine.
him.
I honestly
Pete-
imagine
Pete-
Peter Beck
guys,
would have a bigger chance of playing.
Jimmy Boy, Elon Chan, and Brory Truno, and a Peter Peck.
Okay,
Peter
I
Peck-
tweeted
Peter
at
Peck.
Peter Peck. Tweeted
Yes.
at Peter Peck.
But
Anyways,
So,
the
but I-
Dynetics human landing system also is easy to launch, as if because it's being small, it's pretty easy to launch. You can only.
Well,
I'm pretty
I
sure you
mean,
can launch on a
either
Vulcan.
Assemble a
So,
Dynamics lander.
Part reuse.
Because it
it's
looks
like
like the
2 or 3
Dynamics lander is
volts.
only designed to be in one part. So how do you even assemble it?
But even if you even if you launch
the
with a
fuel
block,
tanks would be staged separately at the moon.
but theoretically, if you want to reuse this thing, you're gonna have to do a multi-launch eventually. So you can launch SLS Block 1B the first time, but then and every other time you're gonna have to use Vulcans to add those drop tanks back.
Yeah, that's gonna be a problem.
right. But if we're talking about the landers themselves, which is I'm assuming the focus of what we're trying to talk about, what Woog mentioned, like the center of gravity being at different points is it actually it's a pretty interesting concept because if Dynetics has the lower center of gravity to where astronauts can basically craft, like
I mean,
any
like,
number of things can go wrong, and the national team they're pretty high up there, and yeah, Starship they're like
Way
We'll
up
talk
astronomically
about
high. So
Starship later. We'll
if
talk
any
about
other
them later.
if any of the sims fail,
Talk about them later.
Dynetics has something that an astronaut can get back in the craft. If
Yeah,
other
like,
things fail, they can open the door and get back in the craft.
Talk about them
if
later.
Yeah,
something
yeah,
went
that's a
wrong, you
dilemma.
could easily get inside the Dynetics lander a lot easier than hell. You would take a few minutes to get inside the Starship because of how high up it is.
Right. That's what I'm.
Oh,
That's what I'm
right,
saying, and
right,
that's what Woog brought up. The Dynetics has a very low center of gravity and a low entry point for the astronauts. That's pretty advantageous
That's
in my
actually,
opinion.
I
I
bet
got
that's
one
what NASA's
question.
thinking about. Because, like, let's say an astronaut accidentally
On
trips, falls, and pops their suit and starts leaking
Right. They
air.
have to get in. They don't have to
They
climb
have
a
to get
massive
in now.
ladder.
They can't wait
Right.
2 minutes for that elevator to go. You're gonna die in 2 minutes.
Right. So it's pretty advantageous that the door is like right there at the surface. That's pretty handy.
Like,
That's
if you get a
I would
Yeah.
say
tear in
That's
your
why
Kinetics
they
is
you
the
got
got
strongest
9 you got
candidate for a
high.
2024 landing.
No,
you get a
this is
tear
not
in
the
your suit.
strongest
You got
candidate, and
90
I'm going to tell
seconds
you why.
to.
So
Well-
first of all, Dynetics lander, it's the one that hasn't. It's this is the only one that hasn't started development already. National team has been in, well, at least Blue Moon has been in development for at least 3-4 years.
right, but
Starship
those
has
aren't the
been
same
And
thing.
apparently, I don't see any
Starship for
numbers, but
the last
apparently
4
the ascent
years.
stage is Orion derived.
Yeah, so like national
And
team
the
has the best
the
chance.
transfer stage is Cygnus derived.
Oh, clearly.
And
So-
let me talk about the
Yeah.
disadvantages of this lander. So
Okay, but only if you talk about the disadvantages of the Starship lander.
we'll get
All
to
of them have
Starship
their
later. We'll
disadvantages.
get to Starship later. I'm
No,
gonna get to
I want you to promise that if you're going to talk about the disadvantages of Dianetics, you're going to talk about the disadvantages of Starship.
I was gonna talk about the disadvantages of Starship anyway.
Okay.
Why can't we,
okay,
why
I'm
can't
holding
we
you
go
to that.
one by
Starship.
one and talk about it? So like I think Woog did a good job of talking about a single topic, and he
At
mentioned
the end, we can
first
compare
lander.
them.
Like this
Yeah.
is just descending into just madness. Like it's not.
This is madness.
There's no
We have a
real.
good old.
Yes.
Okay, guys.
yes.
So guys, just cover the pros and cons of each lander, and then we could compare.
That's what we
them
were
all
trying
at
to
the end,
do, and then you
okay?
had to interject and say that whatever you had to say was
Oh my
more
gosh, let's
important
go.
than what we were
Let's go.
talking about.
Moving on.
Slander.
All right.
Moving right along.
One thing
So-
about the Dynetics lander is that it's very easily reused. The disposable part is the drop tanks, but those are just fuel tanks, and those are exactly the most expensive part of the vehicle. The rest of the vehicle, returns and could theoretically be refueled. So that's an easy pathway to reusability.
So what's
Hey,
what's
I know
their
this has
plan
nothing
look
to do
like
with
for?
Artemis. Should
like,
we
what-
maybe later today talk about this China capsule that they're going to launch?
No,
Or just maybe. Because, like,
Fuck off, Dragon.
Oh, do you mean the Dragon 1 China
Yeah.
edition?
yeah?
I wouldn't be surprised if it was called Dragon. Actually, it makes sense with the culture.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then
it would also just kind of.
Sex,
I think.
too.
I think because they're very much aware of
China
SpaceX's
X.
Dragon, they're not going to call it that.
Okay.
Yeah,
We're
could
gonna
get
get
in.
Let's go to the national team,
No.
please. The cool one. Let's get to
Can
it.
I want to
National
talk
team
about the
lander.
disadvantages
Can I
of
talk about
Dynetics.
the
Can I
cons
talk about
of
disadvantages?
national
You know
thing?
what? There's nothing wrong with Dianetics. They're beautiful. They're little
There is
perfect
problems,
angels.
dude. Like this
Need
isn't
better
just...
organization for these.
Okay, so
The Dynetics
disadvantages
lander?
here. Well, one of my major concerns here is the fact, well, center of mass, it being really low, it could be an advantage being able to step right out. But also, you have the center of mass. The engines are basically horizontal. You can basically spread out your arms, and like the engines would be the equivalent of where your palms would be. So if one engine fails, depending on how fast they spool up, if they don't spool up that fast, you could theoretically go into a spin.
Yeah, that's a good point. That is a good point.
You could tip.
If
Like,
If these
it only
like
takes.
if these are pressure fed engines, then you're probably not gonna have a problem. But if these are hydrolocks, oh boy,
Oh,
that's not gonna be
goodness.
fun.
Well, they don't look. I mean, I'm going just off looks here. They don't look that big. Well, no, actually, they do when compared to the. Yeah, those.
Some good engines.
Actually,
Yeah,
no,
I
those
think they
wouldn't
might
be
be
Hydrolox
hydrolocks.
engines. Because and I can tell this because I know because if you look at it, you see there's a big tank and then a tiny circular tank. The tiny circular tank is either fuel or oxidizer. Most likely it's oxidizer. Now the ratio of liquid hydrogen to liquid oxygen is much higher. So if it was liquid hydrogen in there, those tiny little balls should be a lot bigger. So I don't think it's hydrogen in there.
So it's Hydrolox engines, therefore they're not going to spool up as fast, and it's going to have
No,
the issue.
I don't think they are Hydrolox engines.
Yeah. So if they, oh, you don't think they are hydrolocks engines?
No, because if you look at the oxidizer tank and the fuel tank, the oxidizer tank is tiny compared to the fuel tank. Whereas if it's like a Hydrolox tank, the LOX tank of the SLS is massive, and the Hydrolox tank of the SLS is like 2 or 2.5 times the size. But those fuel tanks are way bigger than the oxidizer tanks. So
Well,
they
I
don't
don't
look
see
to
them
be Hydrolox.
I don't see them being pressure fed or hypergolic because
Yeah, I
Kind of
think
an
there are. I
hypergolic.
think they might be hypergolic.
I don't know. Could it be
Interesting.
methalox? Could it be methalox by any chance?
No.
I wouldn't.
They're
I
using
wouldn't bet
a
on
re-
Metalox because it's
No.
not. It's not easy to refuel at the moon, because there's very little carbon on the moon.
They're going to use a reverse hybrid storable hypergolic called Coke and Mentos.
All right.
The
Yeah.
Well,
best fuel.
The
well,
best.
either
the
way,
best
so,
Okay,
like-
can we
game
move
of
on to
fuel.
the national team now, please?
So
The cool
oh,
ones.
but right before that, just as yeah, so I'm having those engines all the way on the side, like right next to the center of mass. As yeah, it's gonna have a chance of spinning out. Whereas say on the national lander, you have two BE7s on the bottom, but they're really close. They're right under the center of mass. So if one fails, you can gibble the other.
Yeah, I love how we're like being like, oh, look at these engines. Look at all this redundancy. We need more
We're
redundancy.
nerds.
And then meanwhile, the first lunar lander literally had a single engine, and that was
And
it.
the ascent stage had one chance of turning on. If
Yeah, if it didn't ignite, they were stuck on the moon. And the first time a lunar ascent engine was ever fired was on the moon. There was no test firing beforehand. The first time those engines fired was on the moon.
Well, there were test firings, but
Of other
those
engines.
specific, yeah.
But they could never fire an ascent stage engine and put it on a lander. All those ascent stage engines for the lunar lander were essentially fresh engines. They had never been fired before. Please, can we talk about the HLS?
all right,
the
next,
NLS, or whatever it is.
Yeah, we're good.
No,
Let's go
if
to the
that
next one.
lem
I got other complaints we can save for later.
Okay, come on, let's go. The cool ones. Time to
Turn
get to
it.
the cool ones.
Fate
Okay,
has
okay,
ordained the men who went to the moon to explore in peace will
Let's
stay
go.
on the
I
moon
am
to
done
rest in
looking at
peace.
this like 1970s
okay.
animation. This looks horrible.
Okay.
Genetics.
But before we
company.
move to national team, I'd just like to bring up the fact that somehow this is the highest rated one. So that says a lot about this design.
Confidence.
Yeah.
No,
Even though
really, I believe it's the highest rated because it's the most simple. But I do believe NASA likes the national team lander better because it's very close to the lander they wanted originally. With
It
a
also has
transfer
more
stage,
capability.
an
Right,
ascent
but
stage,
they have to
and
prove themselves, which is why we have
Right.
this whole process.
yes,
Yeah.
but
Also,
with
the national
the
team, the national lander is way more capable than this. Like this thing, like there's not much down mass and there's not much up mass. The
well, this
margins are tight.
thing, what its purpose is
Take a rock and that's it.
the purpose of the Dynetics lander is to solely land people on the moon. That's all it does. That's all it wants to do. That's all it cares about doing. The National
No
Team
rocks.
Lander cares about landing people on the moon as well as cargo, I believe. And
Yeah.
funny enough, though, the Dynetics lander actually has more habitable human space than the National Team Lander.
Interesting.
Thing is, so if you want to like collect samples and stuff, like or bring cargo down, the national team lander is a way to go. But if say you have a base on the surface or something, and you're just doing crew transport, or if you're ignoring Starship, Dynetics is like the way to go.
Dynamics
like a car
almost
versus
reminds
a
me
truck.
of just like a base itself. Like it
Yeah,
looks
but
like a
none of
lunar-
these
it looks
initial
like a base.
landers care about if there are bases or not. Like this is
Exactly.
like phase. This is a phase 1
Exactly.
type
Like,
of operation. So
You gotta
mean,
build
yeah,
up that
exactly.
you
Artemis
can't
system.
judge it with all the other future possibilities of what NASA wants to
Yeah, but
do.
can we
On
please go to the national lander now, please? We've been so long on this, and nobody really cares anymore. We talked about everything.
Next lander is more like a car to transport humans, and the national
flip
team
the
lander is more of a
damn
truck.
slide. Flip the
Okay,
Yes.
slide.
change it. Yes, finally.
Thank
The
you.
cool kids.
Oh,
Is
the
that
curtains waving.
transition?
That was a transition for the ages.
Oh, that's so
Pause it-
much better.
pause
That
it
looks
there, 'cause
so
that's
much
the
better.
coolest
Oh,
image.
Oh, that's
thank
a
God.
much
This is
Yeah.
Oh, you got
eye-candy.
them circular solar panels.
Those are the. Wait, I thought Lockheed Martin had the patent on the circular solar panels.
Northrop Grumman has had circular solar panels on Cygnus forever.
But no, because the reason Orion doesn't use circular solar panels is because ESA doesn't have the proprietary technology for circular solar panels.
Yeah, but that doesn't say Lockheed's the only one that doesn't have it. It's more that ESA doesn't have it. Lockheed has it, and so does Northrop Grumman.
I
yeah,
guess.
but there is no actual advantage to having circular panels.
Just
Like
look cool.
they look
Yeah,
cool,
plus-
but you're actually
Oh.
missing out on surface area for the amount of X and Y space that you're actually taking up and utilizing. You're missing out on
It's Cygnus
surface
derived.
area.
It's
You wouldn't
Cygnus
do it.
derived. These are literally Cygnus solar panels.
Right,
Okay,
but
but
you
I
wouldn't.
would
You wouldn't
imagine
use
that this
that.
transfer stage is significantly larger than the Cygnus because the Blue Moon lander is near the diameter of the second stage of the New Glenn, and that's bigger than the third stage of the Saturn V in every
Wow.
conceivable way.
It's big.
That's a big lander and a big transfer stage.
It's a big
How
boy.
are you gonna launch this thing?
Most of I assume that the transfer stage and the descent stage are going to be launched on New Glenn, and then the ascent stage will be launched on Vulcan.
Makes a lot of sense, but that's
I thought
3
the
launches
transfer
for a
stage was
single
going- I
landing.
thought the transfer stage was going
Yeah.
on Vulcan. I guess maybe not.
It's a single landing on an
Transfer stage is
that's 3
huge.
launches, 2 of which that's 3 launches.
Well,
2
New
of which
Glenn's
are
not a
gonna be
real rocket, so why are we even
New
talking about it?
Glenn.
Well, New
New
Glenn actually
Glenn.
has fuel tanks now.
New
Okay.
Glenn has New Glenn has stuff.
Don't make us do
Infrastructure
an
into
SLS
Starship.
style
No, I'm
compilation.
merely pointing
New
out how
Glenn.
you guys lose your shit over Starship, but New Glenn,
No.
which
New
has
Glenn does have fuel tanks, like official
okay,
flight tanks.
okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, if
Really
nobody
quiet
watched
about
that
their
video, but it
progress.
was like a 1-minute video where they showed off the New
Christ.
Glenn tanks.
Yeah.
It was like got 58,000.
Have they been
views.
pressure tested? Has anyone watched that
Not
stuff
yet.
actually?
No,
We
but
don't
they,
know.
but
No.
they are
So
official
exactly.
flight
So I'm
tanks.
pointing out the hypocrisy here that takes place every single time that I bring up. You guys lose your shit because Starship isn't a thing, but Blue Origin's New Glenn is. Like it's ridiculous.
The New Glenn tanks
How?
are
How?
for an
Because
official
it's
orbital. They're for an
Jesus
orbital
fucking
flight,
Christ.
just like the Space Launch
Cool.
Systems
Okay.
tanks are.
Yep.
These Starship tanks are not for orbital flights.
There's
Hey,
still
can we
tank-
stop
there's still
arguing
flight
about
hardware.
this and get back to the
But
lander?
they're prototypes. They aren't official flight hardware. They're
Guys,
prototypes.
this is off topic.
Off topic. We can take this afterwards.
Okay, advantages of the National Lander. So, it has very extreme. It has probably the best cargo capability for a medium-sized lander you're probably ever gonna get. You have decent return mass. You could take 2 to 4 people down to the surface of the moon, and it's you can reuse the ascent stage
And the
you can
transfer stage.
and the transfer stage. All you need to replace is the descent stage, which and Blue Origin has also brought up the possibility where at least during the old Blue Moon presentation, where in the future they would try to make it ISRU capable. So in the future, the descent stage could even become reusable.
Thing.
Oh, another advantage that the National Lander has is it has a very, very wide base compared to its height.
It,
Thing
is
ain't
gonna
gonna
make
tip
it
over
incredibly
it is
easily.
very
stable.
stable.
It isn't as stable as the original lunar lander because that was very squat and very wide. But it's it's way more stable than Starship in this configuration, and a bit more stable than the Dianetics lander, which has a
Dianetics.
fairly small landing base.
Yeah. The Dynamics is pretty safe side to side, but if it rolls forward, that's a problem.
Oh, then you're
Yeah, if
done
it's like
for.
if it's off Starship, I don't know what they're gonna do with that. If that thing's like on any
Save it,
inclination,
save it,
it's
save it,
over.
save it.
Save it for
save
Starship.
Save it, save it.
Another advantage of the national team, I think we might have already touched on this, is that there's already hardware for this thing. We have the BE7 engine, right? That's what
Yeah,
it is, right?
BE7.
That already exists and has been test fired. And then the Blue Moon lander has already been in development for a while. Plus the Ascent stage. Now, personally, I don't see any resemblance, but they say the Ascent stage is Orion derived.
Interesting.
And then obviously the transfer stage is Cygnus derived, and that's I think why they got over $500 million is because this is the lander idea NASA likes the most and the one that is the most promising. Even
It
though
also has the big name companies as well.
it has a combination of new space with Blue Origin plus old space with Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, and I don't know what Draper does, but hey, they're there.
Avionics and descent.
Well, I mean, I know they do avionics for the lander, but I don't know what they do.
Descent guidance.
I know what they do for the
That's pretty
lander. I don't know what they actually do elsewhere, though. Like what their company does.
Like Google them.
Now we don't need to
Draper
Google it. Let's move
Laboratory.
on. What?
I think they're just a software company.
They just
A
they
software
do,
company that's
They do like satellite systems and stuff, and software for Space Force.
yeah.
Driving cars.
The front page of their website is the National Lander now.
Basically they're just they just do a lot of software. They do commercial stuff, space stuff, national security for the Space Force, and some other strategic stuff. Yeah, if you want to have a good lander, you gotta have good software.
The early Soviet Union would disagree with you. Hashtag hardlandings.com.
Hashtag Mir, the incident with the Mir space station and the Progress resupply vehicle.
Bro, the early Soviet landers, they didn't even have decent, and they didn't have engines. What they would do is they would drop them onto the moon's surface, and then they would just hope they didn't get completely ruined. And some of them
Didn't
worked.
they basically throw a flag grenade at the moon?
Yes, that's exactly what it was, and it would scatter little pieces all over the surface that had the Soviet Union symbol on them. So there's potentially hundreds of miles of lunar surface just covered with Soviet flags.
Wow.
What they've gone
Okay,
what?
Those are probably also
literally
bleached
Red Moon.
white
If
too.
they can't beat the Americans to the moon, they're gonna bomb the moon.
That's literal.
Just
That's
carpet
They
bomb
can't
the
have.
moon.
If we can't have it, they can't have it.
Okay. Back on
Now
topic.
can we get a start, please? We've been on this
One
long.
weakness of the National Team Lander is complexity, since it has 3 elements: an ascent, a descent, and a transfer, and that requires about 3 launches, and all 3 of these are kind of
Actually, technically, it
complex in
requires
a bit.
4 launches if you include the launch of SLS and Orion.
True, but I'm talking about the assembling the lander. So as compared to the Dynetics one, which is like a single element with like 2 tanks. Now that's also 3 launches, although it's actually simpler because those are just tanks, and these are with rendezvous and docking capability. So that's a lot more complex.
Although I find it funny that I should have pointed this out with Dynetics. What everyone was raging on Boeing for doing was that, oh, you're just going to do this to fly it on SLS, to fly more SLSs. Since the Dynetics lander is going to be doing the exact same thing. It's going to, because it can launch on an SLS Block 1B, and then an SLS Block 1 takes a crew cargo there, and then it lands on the surface. That's exactly what they were going to do with the Boeing lander, but the Dynetics lander decided they were going to do it instead.
Well, except the Dynetics lander has commercial options, so that
Dynetics lander does have commercial options, but I believe its first launch will be an SLS Block 1B because that's going to be the quickest way to do it. And then after that, they're going to send Vulcans up with fuel tanks to continue reusing it.
How much
But
does fuel tanks weigh?
one will be
well,
a
if
SLS Block
the
1B.
first launch is gonna be SLS Block 1B, then that automatically makes it dependent on Block 1B being ready for 2024, which is really up in the air at this point.
Oh, I don't think they're.
national-
I don't.
that gives the
believe
national
that-
team
that-
immediate
actually, that's a
advantage
good point. But they might not. They might not be vying for 2024. They might just be vying for a lander contract.
The whole thing, they're all vying for 2024. Even SpaceX is vying for 2024 right now.
We all know how ridiculous that would look, docked.
Gee, I wonder where you would get any idea of that.
I'm pretty sure.
Thank you for your
Starship would have
render,
the
David.
ability to carry Orion
You're very
towards the
welcome. It
moon.
took me 5 seconds to make. Just took the Orion, went boop, boop, plopped it right in there.
Actually, Willis,
take time
can
to
you
make the
put
lunar
Orion
starship?
Oh my
Can you
gosh,
put-
you have no idea how long it took to make that lunar starship. It took ages.
Actually, yeah. Willis, can you put Orion inside?
Inside.
Like, put Orion
Guys,
on
this
the
is off
crane
topic.
for lunar
This,
starship.
this isn't Ask David for Renders time. This is Artemis podcast
We're
time.
going off top. We're going off topic.
Topic
Please,
now.
okay, let's move on to the next lander because we've praised this one far too long.
Willis, okay, Willis. I need you to make me a promise.
No, we got to. I will make you this promise after we move to the next one.
No, just you have to stay quiet for at least wait until everybody's finished.
I'm sorry,
and
you
then we'll
lost
give
me
you
at stay quiet. That's impossible.
Well, no, we're gonna give you a specific block of time to rant.
No, this is not gonna work.
Freely.
At all.
It'll work. Just be quiet at first, and then just pent up all your anger, and then once we're all done talking, you can
I
expel
actually
it all
like
out in a
the
long
idea.
rant.
I want to talk about it. I don't hate it at all.
Well, but we're gonna give you your specific block so you can rant on whatever you want,
I
good or
don't,
bad.
I don't want to
whatever.
rant. I just want to talk about it, dude. I'm not gonna rant about anything.
All right, just
I'm just gonna
Just
talk about it like
promise
these other
you
landers.
stay
I'm
chill.
not gonna like look. It's a NASA sponsored lander. I'm cool with anything NASA sponsors.
Anything?
Anything. Yes.
I'll remember that. Okay, next
NASA,
slide.
Here.
NASA knows what they're doing. They're smart people, and I will support every decision they make.
All right.
Remember when they killed the worm?
Well, they brought it back.
Remember when?
They need to
remember
make
when
wormhole
Apollo
now.
died?
Worm on Starship, worm on Starship.
I should put
Remember
the
when they
worm on
didn't
my
do?
Starship.
Remember when it
Actually, that'd be pretty
deorbited
That
my
actually
lab?
pretty-
Okay, can we go on to the Starship now,
Oh.
please? Thank you.
Oh crap! What is this?
Hey, I wonder who those renders are from.
Oh, David.
Who's
Acceptable.
David?
Our David. Willis 10.0. Like 10 of
Yes,
them now.
Look at my beautiful watch. Ooh.
I found this in somewhere.
Look, when I saw this render, I was immediately just jumped up out of my seat and started like, I don't know. I was just very surprised that they actually selected
Bro,
the
when I
Starship
first
as a
saw it,
lander.
When
the
I-
first thing did was
when
go
I
to
saw,
my
like-
computer saying, bro, that Starship though. It's like, what is that? That doesn't look like a starship. That looks like I don't know. It looks like a piece of white corn.
Like, okay, so for me, I understand why they bid it, but I don't understand why their insistence on getting it on having it done for 2024. Like, this seems like a long-term investment more than like a short-term.
Bro, Smarter Everyday liked my render. Oh my god.
Whoa.
Who liked
Congratulations.
Bro, that's insane.
your render?
Smarter Everyday.
Ooh,
Guys,
epic gamer moment.
At
Epic
ULA
gamer
Factory.
moment. Yep.
Oh,
Epic
that's
gamer
This
moment.
podcast was a train. It would have derailed and hit a river a time ago.
I might.
This
I might
train
start my
podcast
own-
was a train. It wouldn't be on the
I'm gonna have
tracks
to
any
start my own
be a
podcast.
car.
Yeah, derailed.
I'm gonna have
I'll
to
join
start
both
my own-
derailing.
podcasts. I'll join both podcasts. I just want to be on them.
This is my second Artemis podcast, and it's already gone to shit.
This is my first. So, Lunar Starship, am I right?
So yeah, like as said by a friend of mine in another server, or I think he might have also posted in this server. This is like using a blowtorch to light a candle.
Yeah.
Or a flamethrower. to light a
Blowtorch
candle.
or use Boring Company
Using,
flamethrower. Not a flamethrower.
Yeah, it's like using a Boring Company flamethrower on a
Not a
candle.
flamethrower.
Yo, I'm at 1%
It's
on my
not-
phone. That's not good. Where's my charger?
Like this, it doesn't make sense for 2024, but it does make sense for for a potential lunar base. I mean, or even just like not just a lunar base, but say in the 2030s is when they're like say sending I don't know 10 crew at a time. However they're doing this, or in the future, or they would want to. They'd probably like to go to a specific area of the moon to do a long-term study. They'd probably just send a starship since it could easily support like 5 to 10 people for like 6 months.
Gamer moment.
Okay, but
You
the
can
only
do some
problem with
serious scientific exploration with this thing.
you really could. Just the thing is, for 2024 landing, this thing's inapplicable. I mean, if the numbers from SpaceX are correct, this thing can carry both of the other landers on it for a landing.
And the LEM actually depending on how the mass works out.
It really does sound very suspicious, though. Not gonna lie.
No, okay, so you guys are looking at it from the propaganda of Starship being a single entity. Like, what's going to actually be SpaceX's proposal for a lander on the lunar surface is not going to resemble Starship. It's going to use Starship technology, and it's probably going to be used as a test bed for Starship. But what SpaceX is actually probably going to end up proposing for a valid lander is not going to resemble what you see in the renders. It's not going to resemble all the other bullshit propaganda you see coming out of SpaceX for what they want Starship to be.
Well, man,
It's going to be something that more closely resembles the other two lander proposals. And let's not forget that both the other landers are not also going to look like what you're seeing in these renders. They're in like the very early conceptual phase of how they want to operate. And what SpaceX is proposing for Starship is not that far off from what they're proposing for the other landers in terms of being a conceptual project.
I mean, you see how much the LEM changed? It went from like 5 legs to 4 legs.
Right. When the LEM was selected to what it actually looked like when it landed was very, very different. And that's going to be the same for all 3 of these teams. They don't work that same way. So the fact that you guys want to like lose your shit over the fact that Starship.
Nobody's losing anything.
You are. You are. You do this
not
every
losing
time. You
We
do
have
this
not said
every
a single
time.
word bad. I just said it was suspicious. That's
Really?
all.
Really? Yeah. Okay. So why is it more
Can we save this
suspicious than the other
conversation to the
2
end?
landers?
Well, I mean, I just think it's suspicious that it can carry all of those
You
landers.
think
You
it's
didn't even let me finish, dude. Like, chill. I just think it's suspicious that it can carry all of the landers down at once. I think maybe that's a little bit reaching. I don't think it's impossible, but I think it's a bit reaching. Like, chill,
Yo,
dude.
David, you honestly hate SpaceX, and that's fine.
I
Like,
don't
you can
hate
hate SpaceX.
SpaceX
Yes,
at
you do.
all.
You can
I
hate
just didn't
SpaceX
like
all you
Luke
want.
Starship.
But if you want to start talking about New Glenn being a possible lift
You
vehicle
want
for
me
some
to
of these
bring
other
up the
objects,
hardware? I'll do it. I will do it. I can bring
Okay,
up
how
the
about both
hardware
of you
right
guys
here,
shut up
right
before I make
now
this
for an
podcast
orbital
rated
flight.
how about
Okay.
How about David Nagy shuts up? I'm
Look, we're
tired of
trying
him
to
telling me
keep
shut
it
up.
PG. 13 at the most.
Okay, 13. 13.
Look, the point is that I'm allowed to voice my opinion, and that I think
and so am I.
dude. But all you've been doing is just telling me that I'm not allowed to say anything. Like,
I didn't
dude,
say that. Not once did I say you aren't allowed to say anything.
But you've been interrupting me the whole time. Like, dude,
Really?
I
I've
just
been in
want
this
to say that I
podcast for
think
like a third of the time.
you haven't even let me
Willis,
finish
you
it.
interrupted
I just want to
everyone
say
here.
that I think it's a bit suspicious that they think that they can carry that much mass down. I like you said, this obviously isn't the design that's actually going to land on the moon. But I think that when they actually get to that design, it's going to be heavily modified, and it won't be able to carry what they're saying it's going to carry now. Like, is that not reasonable to think that?
No, my whole point is that all these concepts that they're releasing right now are not going to be the end state. So being hypercritical of a single one of these 3 prospects is just stupid bias.
Though.
Yes, you are.
I'm just saying I don't think it's going to be able to eventually carry what they're saying it can carry now. Is that
and
wrong?
it's not going to.
I don't see.
I agree with you.
I don't see how I'm wrong here. Like, I wasn't.
You aren't right.
I was just expressing my opinion. Like, bruh.
I can't tell if you're agreeing with each other or you're disagreeing with each other.
Okay, back to the landers. It seems like the Starship would be like you guys said before, it'd be a very good long-term proposal. And I think that's the only reason why they bid on it in the beginning. They can get that kick going towards SpaceX, like, hey, we want this for the future. If you can get it fast enough, we can do 2024, but it's a better long-term option. That's just thinking in the long term here, and that's a smart decision for them to make.
Yeah,
it's more
like,
of an investment.
Start early, and so SpaceX is gonna make Starship either way. Even like regardless of if it fails or not, they're gonna try and at least like make it to Leo. And
Yeah.
someone's already paying to fly on that thing. So
Oh yeah, that
NASA
one millionaire.
Yeah, but still, someone's gonna want to fly on that thing. NASA knows that it's in a position where if they have SpaceX involved in Artemis, they can give input into Starship, and they could potentially make it a safer vehicle, and not only give them these massive capabilities, but also give SpaceX's customers a much safer product.
That's exactly how I think about it as well.
It's basically how Crew Dragon went, kind of.
Exactly, like Dragon Rider.
Like,
actually,
imagine if they had like kept the propulsive landing idea. How dangerous that would have been.
And I'm sure they would have at least had like a backup parachute.
Right, but at some point there's a point at which you're too close to the ground for the parachutes to if you're too close, there's a point where you become too close to the ground for the parachutes to deploy in time, and if your engine's cut off from there until you're on the ground, you'll die.
Definitely.
You'll definitely be
really
very
all they're
badly
gonna have to.
injured.
They're just gonna have to prove that propulsive landing is viable. This is
Ship
that
Red
it
Dragon,
works
though.
reliably.
For propulsive landing is the only way it's going to work on the moon and Mars.
Well, on the moon, and Mars, yes, but on Earth, I mean, you could.
Yes,
on
Earth
like,
is where you're going to actually have to prove it, because that's, in my opinion, incredibly unsafe to propulsively land on Earth with no backup systems. Like, if they had like parachutes that could, or some form of escape system where you could detach the crew module and then parachute it down if the engines failed in flight, that'd be fine. I'd be fine with that. But the fact that it has no backup systems is what's grinding my gears.
Well, and also now that you basically have these what are effectively like Super Dracos or some form of it, like if the whole cabin could detach and have those Super Dracos
I like
on there,
that idea.
like,
If
definitely.
If the cabin can detach, if the cabin can detach and the Super Dracos can be used in a, that's another thing though. I think the Super Dracos, the abort capability is going to come from the actual Raptor engines, because those Super Dracos or whatever they are at the top, they're going to be doing the descent burn after the Raptors have killed off the horizontal velocity. And so when they're doing descent burn, if they shut off, the Raptor engines will fire for the abort capability, which is pretty ingenious if you think about it.
Definitely. I think I'm going to call them the Hyper Dracos until they actually get a real name from SpaceX.
Why don't it just be actual Super Dracos?
Yeah, and also on descent, like from Earth's from orbit down. So yeah, propulsive landing with no it's not that propulsive landing is dangerous. It's propulsive landing with no backups that's dangerous. If your backup to propulsive landing is also propulsive landing, that's fine. Like
no matter how reliable your system is, if it doesn't have a backup and it fails, you can still die. Like, these shuttle boosters were incredibly reliable with 270 out of 271 flight successes, but the one time they failed, because there was no backup abort system, it killed people.
Exactly. So like, let's say similar to the Falcon 9 boosters, say you have a 90% success rate with these landings. If if those fail, you have this secondary landing system with these Super or Hyper Dracos. And say those have 90%. So in that case, not only do 90% of the time the Raptors are successful, but then and in 90% of those 10% that they do fail, those are also successful. So then really you have 99% success with propulsive landing.
Which is pretty ingenious, honestly. But I do think they should at least look into giving it abort capabilities, because if they did, then I would pretty much have no problems with it if they could make it work. If there is an abort system, I would pretty much have no problems with it, because that's the biggest problem I see with it, is that if I guess we're talking about the shiny version now, is that if it's launching Crew and doesn't have an abort system, it's very, very dangerous. Like, it's not inherently dangerous, but if something goes wrong, it's going to be very bad if you can't get your crew away.
Guys,
and also, much of the those Super Dracos, they only need to be there for either moon landings or for crew variants, like always on Crew and always on moon landings.
Well, actually, I've been thinking about it for just a few seconds. I don't think these are Super Dracos, because a Super Draco on Earth, when fired, when all of them fire, it only gives a Crew Dragon 4 Gs, I believe, 4.3 Gs.
It's like 4
Not
to
to
5
mention
Gs.
that it uses a different type of fuel.
So I do think these are going to be different engines, but they're going to serve a
Hyper
similar
Dracos.
purpose.
I already tweeted Musk about it. Just ask if they're gonna be called Hyper Dracos.
Ask him if he's going to call them Anim engines. Actually, that doesn't work. Never mind. I thought that sounded better in my head.
Now or One Punch engines. It's probably gonna be something from anime or something.
It'll be like a suicide burn with an anime with like a
suicide burn with an anime sound.
Okay.
That would be epic and ridiculous at the exam.
Everything just
I can't speak today. I can't speak English today.
Anyways, the SpaceX only got an acceptable rating from NASA.
Which, to be honest, like, the thing is, like, management rating, I'm pretty sure acceptable is only because of Elon. If you got rid of Elon, it probably
I have to agree. The management is pretty much entirely due to Elon. Like if it was if Elon was out of the equation, they would have probably gotten a great management rating.
If it was just Gwen Shotwell, it would have been given really.
No, I predict that Elon they'll find a way to get him out of those companies because he's a huge risk if he keeps tweeting that kind of stuff, man.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the big problem. Like, why don't they have someone who's hired to just smack his phone out of his hand when he's about to tweet something? Like, they should actually have someone who that's their job. Like, what are you trying to tweet?
The thing is,
no.
So the thing is, Elon Musk is not a bad person or a bad CEO. He just tweets really stupid shit.
Right.
Yeah.
He
he
stays up way too late. He stays up way too late. He doesn't sleep, and then someone personally wrongs him, so he decides to go down the rabbit hole of like some Twitter war with this dude. And it always looks bad. You're never gonna look good if that's what you're doing. Like you won't win. You can win the argument, and you've still lost the war.
There's an actual real acceptable excuse for what's going on now. I think he's very, very stressed out right now because his baby is due on Monday.
Definitely.
And I think that might have something to do with what's going on.
And also the fact he's running 2 multi-billion-dollar companies in the middle of an economic.
I don't think that's the problem. Tesla's been doing pretty hot lately. Well, until he decided he was going to cut.
Well, except they're still not profitable.
If you actually look at the stocks for Tesla, they were going down before he actually made the Tesla stock needs to go down.
That's interesting. That means That means if they were going down, he just tried to make it look like he made them go down.
Well, no, it's also that people had measured the amount of time it's been since he said something stupid on Twitter, and we're like, well, it's got to be coming, and then they were right.
Yeah.
It's like thing where where basically like you reverse invest in a company or reverse buy stocks, like you bet against them.
You can sort of predict whenever Elon's
really?
about
Actually, no.
to
It's
have
because
a
it's probably because when Elon was sleeping on the Gigafactory, someone sabotaged him and laced the Gigafactory floor with chemicals that gave him brain damage.
Oh, that didn't happen back whenever they were making the Roadster. Okay, back on topic. We can talk about Elon Musk and conspiracy theories later.
All right,
we can do that at the end.
Think we should at least try to compare this with the other landers in a fair way. For example, one of the disadvantages with this is that it's fairly complex, especially since it's like multi-launch to refuel. But also in the HLS source selection thing, they mentioned something about the RCS system and the propulsion whole thing, having some issues or whatever.
Okay, and also let me hold up my end of the bargain because I need to make that promise to David Willis. So the problems with this lander are while it does have its massive advantages. The problem is, RCS system. We don't really know the specifics on that, and it's also its landing legs specifically. As of late, it seems like it might not be as big of a problem as it is. It's still going to be a major issue since you basically have a skyscraper with a very small base.
Yeah, I mean you have to bolt that thing down.
Skyscrapers, since a skyscraper has to be over a certain height. There's a single skyscraper in the city of Huntsville, Alabama, and it's the Saturn V moon rocket.
Wow.
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 So I will again concede that, well, not concede. I will point out that I do not think that Starship that lands on the lunar surface is going to look anything like what we're seeing in the renders. So yes, I see what you're saying about the base of
We'll have big
basically
shiny
the center
lasers.
of gravity. The center of gravity is like really stupidly high in that render, and it doesn't make any sense. Period. Like in any engineering sense whatsoever.
Starship.
I would
So
like to see them attempt to make upscaled versions of Falcon 9 landing legs, but like huge, and put them on the side and see how that works.
We could just try the
Yeah.
interplanetary
Those
transport
are-
system landing legs. Those are
And-
pretty wide.
and
Those
that's
are-
something
those are pretty
something
wild.
I will
Yeah.
say is very odd. Like SpaceX is they've been very successful with what they've done with the Falcon 9. So why does Starship look so different from what they've
That's a
already
good
done?
point.
And that's
Why-
something that I will definitely say is it's pie in the sky kind of things that we see out of these renders and what they say is going to happen. But at the end of the day, like the technology they've developed for Falcon 9, why aren't they progressing that? And I
Well,
think
you know what,
that
I
might
think I have-
actually
I
be.
think I have,
Okay, well
I
the
have-
thing
I
is,
have
okay,
a view on
start.
that.
You can't
'Cause
compare.
the
you
Falcon
can't
9
compare-
first stage dry mass is around 20-ish tons, but a super heavy dry mass or a Starship dry mass didn't they say
Much
Starship
more.
dry mass was like 100 or 200 tons?
120
Ow.
tons.
Something ludicrous like that.
Yeah,
120
it's a
tons
weird,
for
it's a weird departure from what they know and what we know that SpaceX can do. It's weird. It's not a continuation. It seems like a different project. It's just weird to me. That's what's weird to me about
Okay,
what
well,
SpaceX is doing.
I do agree with you, Mr. Fu. I do think that, well, I don't know if you think this, but you did make a point that I think we can branch off to. I think we're gonna see in the future this particular lunar starship will get bigger landing legs, maybe even similar to Falcon 9 landing legs. I think that's
Yeah.
a possibility that's quite possible.
And I think it'll
Large
be.
for
I think it'll
super
be much
heavy.
shorter too. Like,
Large for super heavy will be rivaling like an aircraft carrier for size. I mean,
Well,
it's huge.
So, but for Starship, like the Falcon 9 landing leg, this seems impractical. All for like I understand where you're coming from.
And
You're gonna get
untested,
a
yeah.
wide landing base, but you do realize how long it takes for those things to jack up, and also this doesn't necessarily have to be extremely aerodynamic.
But David, you know, right, that
Have to
there's
be at
no
all.
atmosphere on the moon, so you could theoretically deploy them whenever you wanted, and
Say
you
that
could
again?
retract them whenever you wanted, because there's no atmosphere.
Yeah, I know you can, but also like it takes a while. Like, you see the videos of Falcon 9 retracting its landing legs?
Right,
It
right.
takes
So-
a long
you
time.
can actually, technically, you can launch it with the landing legs deployed outright from the surface. The landing legs just stay deployed, and then you can fold them back in. Or actually, you'd never need to fold them back in ever. You just keep them deployed because you're not going into an atmosphere.
Right. So like that's what I'm saying. Like the scenario of like it being Starship that is being a lunar lander makes no sense because
Yeah.
Starship has other factors to take into account, like aerodynamics and all these other things. It's not going to be Starship. It's going to be some variant of
Unless-
Starship that goes to the
Unless,
surface.
Mr. Fu, they are using this as a test bed for their actual Starship and want to test out Starship systems on this vehicle. I don't
Yeah,
know how much NASA
But
would
they
like
but they
I
aren't
don't
gonna they
want-
aren't gonna do that if they're trying to win a contract from NASA to actually be the provider for
Right,
landing on
right.
the surface for a vehicle. That's not what they're gonna do.
They
So-
still beat out Boeing, so they got something going for them.
Yeah.
Wow, is there any renders or anything of the Boeing landers?
Yeah, there is. It basically looks like
So
something
let
made
me
with KSP.
so yeah, I do agree with you, Mr. Fu, that it's probably gonna look different in the end, but
It has
really-
to. It has
most
to.
of the most of the base systems are like it's still gonna be 9 meters wide. You're probably still gonna have that habitat, but what I can see is say the nose cone being gone and say like just being like a fairing that just like jettisons after launch, since you're not gonna need that, and just like exposes like some
Right.
docking hardware or maybe some
Yep.
communications or other stuff. So it's literally so you got it would just be the lower fuel tank section, the habitat, and maybe maybe move the solar panels to be like since you see the windows are only on one side of the ship, maybe
Yeah.
have the solar panels on the other side. So you have the solar panels facing towards
You know,
the
that
sun.
might be where radiators are, though. That
well-
might be where radiators will go.
Well, I
Because
think
you got
I
to take
think,
into account it will need radiators because of that,
I think
insanely hot
radiators
lunar
are-
day.
I think radiators would be like covering the whole rocket because the whole thing looks exactly the same color. Like so, it probably
Is a radiator.
It's a giant radiator.
So oh yeah,
Radiators.
like you can have the windows on one side, then you can have solar panels on the exact other side. Kind of like how Dragon has solar panels on one side, radiators on the other, except replace those radiators with the habitat windows.
Yeah.
So that means you'll have solar panels facing towards the sun, and you also have the windows facing away from the sun, so you don't have the sun shining through those windows, which could potentially blind or.
I think the
restrict
reason for
UV
the
coming
white
through.
color is because the white background absorbs less heat than a black one.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, so I think what we're gonna see is if you look at the other two proposals for HLS, they're very much more like utilitarian. Like they don't care about aesthetics. It doesn't matter. Like function over form more than anything else.
Well,
If we
Blue
look
Moon
at
has the
SpaceX,
aesthetic.
because SpaceX is
Blue
like
Moon
the
has
Apple. SpaceX is like the Apple of the space industry. Things have to look cool in their renders, and they have to look like they're more squared away. But what we're talking about here, their renders don't make sense for what would actually be viable as a lander for the moon. It just doesn't. Which is why we've been talking about them so much in this podcast. But at the end of the day, if they actually are trying to be selected as a provider for landing on the surface, they're going to have to be much more utilitarian. They're not going to have aerodynamic stuff. They're not going to care about their color scheme. None of that. All that's going to go out the window. So what we're going to see is if SpaceX is actually caring about being a contributor into this Artemis program, is if they can start providing a more viable option for a lander, which for this first phase of being the first selectees for being continued in this program, yeah, it's just cool guy renders that don't matter. But I think what we're going to see across the board is if they're going to be viable.
Looking pretty is the least important part of the lander.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly.
The only reason that Starship has the Starship lander has the dome is because it has to get out the atmosphere when it launches.
Right, which doesn't matter when you're at the moon. Why don't you just ditch that? Which is why the renders don't make sense. Like, I could be proven wrong. Maybe SpaceX does think that they can just strong arm Starship to be this lander thing. I don't think that's going to end up being the case if they're actually going to be it.
There's another angle to this, because there is a possibility that they're trying to convince NASA to let them use this as a test bed for their own Starship. I'm not sure how well
they can to a degree for technologies, but yeah.
But like, if they are trying to use this as a test bed for real Starship technologies, then we could see a lander that doesn't look like it looks more SpaceXy than we'd like.
Well, the thing is, like, why
use it as a test bed.
SpaceX doesn't look bad.
Thing is, why can't you just have that test bed in low Earth orbit? Because
a lot of
landings, you can get some stuff done.
There are a lot of tests you just can't do in low Earth orbit. That's why, although Apollo 9 was a great success, we just had to go to the moon for Apollo 10 before
11.
we could do Apollo 11.
10, 11. Yeah, 11 was a landing. The fact remains that
So earlier, I heard someone mention that this is a pretty good lander for like the Artemis base camp. Although one question I have is that how is it going to survive the lunar night, considering that the Artemis base camp is at the South Pole, considering it's using solar power?
Well, if it was actual space, I would just spam EKGs.
So it depends on how offset they are from the pole.
The South Pole basically has no.
Right, that's what I'm saying. How offset they are.
Where the sun never sets, and I think that's where NASA wants a base camp.
Yes.
Well, the water is in the places where it never sees the sun.
Where the sun never rises.
Yeah.
We have a pipe from where the sun never sets, which is the British Empire, to the place where the sun never rises.
Ha 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 ha.
So I think the actual solution might actually just be to land it somewhere that is close to where there's never sunlight, but also in a place where there's always sunlight, so that the Artemis base camp's mobile habitability platform thingy can just go to the places with no sunlight, since that's basically a pressurized rover.
Or
my question is, how are they going to get the rover to the lunar
just
surface?
be in one of those permanent sunlight areas, but then everything they need for the water at the poles could be in an adjacent crater that never gets sunlight. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. They can be mutually exclusive. or whatever that word means.
Well, the thing is, it
How will they
depends
get the
also
lander-
where you
how will
are.
they-
Like the first lunar landing is not gonna like the Artemis 3. It's not gonna be exactly at the South Pole. It's probably gonna be somewhere like it might.
It's gonna be, I think, in the Atkin Basin, is what they said.
I don't know, but for all we know, like there's probably gonna be one of the Artemis missions could end up being in an equatorial area like it was for Apollo, just for like a scientific area.
You're not just
Revisit,
gonna land on the
Has
South
that
Pole
ever
with
been
an
discussed?
entire
I don't-
moon to go.
Yeah, you have an
Just
entire
land the moon on the
Use-
moon.
The how we're gonna get to the moon animation even shows that they can go literally anywhere.
Yeah, because that's what a polar orbit can land you literally anywhere.
I mean, NRHO is basically an extremely elliptical polar orbit.
That's really it. That's exactly what it is. It's an
Just gotta
extremely
wait.
polar orbit.
Wait enough time because that orbit takes forever.
No, it doesn't. You get
Wait,
9
what orbit
takes
every
forever?
two- You
The
get
orbit does
you
take
orbit the
the
moon
orbit
9
does take
times
a
for every
while.
2 times
In
the
fact,
moon orbits
most
Earth.
of the time spent on Gateway will actually be millions, well, not millions, hundreds of miles away from the moon. What I'm trying to think of the reference frame I'm using here. It'll be thousands of miles away from the moon most of the time.
And
only
then when
a
you're
got one
closer
big
to it,
question.
it'll be
to actually
faster.
get really close to the moon.
I have one big
It's
question. How
basically like
how is
sun.
NASA
It's like
gonna
a
get the
combination between a polar
pressurized
orbit,
rover?
an elliptical orbit, and sun synchronous.
Yeah, and the fact that what they've done is they've actually they've designed this orbit specifically so that the lunar gateway is always in contact with Earth communications wise.
Also, sunlight.
I think they might have planned it in. I don't think it's gonna. I think they planned the orbit more towards communications than sunlight. I'm not
Sunlight's
sure.
an unintended benefit.
Because
Is there a
you can
sun
last
synchronous
without,
orbit from
you
the
can
moon?
last
Like,
without sun.
Um.
You can last without.
Well,
either
are we
for a
talking
little bit.
synchronous like where? Well, no, because the moon doesn't rotate very fast, so it's not going to be pulling on any orbits like a sun synchronous
right,
orbit
but
would
I mean,
require.
so a sun synchronous orbit on Earth is a product of
It's rotation.
how much more gravity? Yes, but also how much more gravity there is near the equator of the Earth to perturb an orbit to shift a certain amount of degrees every time that it orbits. I don't think that exists on the moon.
Yeah, lots of orbits don't actually exist at the moon because it's an orbiting body of Earth. There's no lunar stationary orbit at the moon because
So you really need
it
one.
would be outside of the moon's sphere of influence.
You'd have to be your orbit at some point would be too much influenced by the Earth.
Lunar stationary orbit would be an orbit that goes inside of the Earth.
Right. In which case you could not do it.
I mean, because technically, if you think about it, we are where we are standing on Earth right now is as far away from the moon as you need to be in a lunar stationary orbit, and you can tell this because we only ever see one side of the moon.
Exactly. Yeah.
We're like, that's how far it would have to be if you wanted to be.
But a
locked
slight
into certain part
inclination.
of
Where
the moon.
like you see the moon wobble up and down a little bit. So not exact, but yeah, you'd end up colliding with the Earth.
End up, you would just always be in the Earth.
Okay, actually, can we move on
Yeah.
to the next slide? We've been here for
Let's do that.
really long.
Yeah, we've been talking about this for way too long.
20 minutes.
It's not gonna forever.
I think these
Okay,
things are
the
fun.
following one.
30 minutes
It's
on this.
going more like booing.
Yeah.
Going
Boo!
on.
Boo!
It's the one that looks the closest to the LEM. I'm gonna give it that.
No, it doesn't.
Well, I mean,
Kinda looks like
it.
there's another one
Squid.
that looks pretty identical to another lander.
Thing is, like,
Well, that's the next one.
But
Thing
the
is,
good
like,
thing is
I-
going
Did anyone
on.
really know what they were until we found out they failed?
yeah,
I
thing is,
wonder how much of Boeing's failure in this contract was because of the other failures that they've had with NASA and
Probably a lot.
and
So
the
just
I
salty.
wouldn't say failures because the only real failure they had was Starliner. They've just been very, very give me money.
yeah,
So
I
the
guess I would say
now you say- now you say it's
loss of
777
confidence.
Max, but I'm not. But that's not a Boeing thing.
I would say
Oh,
loss
so-
of
Between
confidence.
NASA
Yeah.
thing.
Because I
so
think
now you
NASA
say
knows
it's
that
a
Boeing
failure. I
can
thought you
build
said
this.
it was
They just
successful.
know that
It was
Boeing will build this stuff for an outrageous amount of money.
Willis, now you say it was a failure. I remember you saying a few months ago that it was successful because dock to the space station wasn't a requirement.
Well,
Uh,
back
yes,
then we didn't
in
know
that
as much as
sense,
we do now.
It is technically the Starliner
Yeah.
mission is successful in most
Partial
of its aspects.
failure.
Yeah. So like,
Besides
this
almost
is like
losing a
this
heat
is
shield.
the big failure of their space flight, even though it technically wasn't a failure.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just
With the
generalizing.
mission parameters of that specific mission, you're right. It wasn't a failure, but you can also argue that it still leads some massive questions into like confidence of.
Right.
No, of all
Yeah,
those software
I
issues.
see. I see what you're saying though. Yeah.
We can see that.
Because I mean, like if we had a Starliner style incident on this lander, it could botch the moon landing for 2024.
Yeah. Okay, so let me just say I really, really, really hate this lander, but I love the design.
And it looks great.
It looks
It
cool.
does
looks-
look pretty good.
Yeah.
It looks like a lander. What a lander should look like. It just the way that it works is
What's
so.
funny is it looks
horrible.
like a lander from what all these companies think a lander should look like, based off of nothing other than the Apollo program and the lunar landers. So everything's gonna be
Well,
like.
the national team sort of does, but
And,
like a very derived one.
Yeah.
Everyone else is going
These
wrong.
cool guy renders are going to be so different. Like we were talking about before, like what did the lunar lander look like when it was selected for a contract versus what did it actually look like when it touched the surface of the moon? Very different. And it's
Like,
going
I
to be the
can't-
exact
I
same thing
can't
for
say
all these
that-
companies.
I can't say that this Boeing lander looks a lot better than the old one with the curves that looked really
Looked horrible.
Really,
That one was Starliner derived.
ugh.
Although, okay. I want to know what's going on with Lockheed Martin's ascent stage there because they say it's Orion derived, but it doesn't look Orion derived at all.
For the
Just like
wait,
some of the
for the
technologies
this
are,
look-
but the shape
this
isn't.
looks more this looks way more Orion derived than the national team lander because like you take away the like jagged like polygonal squares, whereas you got that pressure vessel. It looks like it could be Orion.
Yeah.
So very interesting.
Okay, so
But
I'm going
let's
to point
move on
something
to
out.
the next one, the one that is far more interesting.
Move the slide.
The
Altair.
Altair, but not Altair.
No,
It's
Ew,
basically
the
just
burger,
where-
disgusting. Yucky.
No, this is Altair with 3 legs. Like look at the way it looks.
Yeah.
It's 3-legged Altair.
It's literally got the airlock, the ascent stage, the big old fuel tank, and the landing leg. Oh my god, the landing legs look identical. Look at how one of the struts is higher up on the landing leg than the adjacent strut. It's exactly the same landing leg.
No, look
Are
at
you
the panels. No, look at the
They
panels.
changed
See,
nothing. It
same
looks
radiator.
exactly the same.
Look at the front of the one on the left. You see this big square thing, this panel thing. Now look at Altair right there. It's the same
Oh
thing.
my! It literally they pitched Altair. They pitched
I really,
Altair.
really want Constellation.
No, what is
So,
the engine
I
down?
mean-
Like
I
what is
mean,
the
Someone
engine
really-
down?
okay. This could actually. This I think I know what their plan was for this. They're gonna launch it separately on an SLS Block 1B, and get it. Orion. This is all speculation, but I think it would work. Orion launches into its near rectilinear halo orbit, and then this lander launches, docks to it, and then you have essentially the Altair Orion setup. And then this lander brings Orion and itself into low lunar orbit. Actually, now that I
And
think
you
about
got-
it, it wouldn't even need to do that. If it can do it already, okay. So what it does is it's gonna dock to Orion and then just then come down on its own, land. The ascent stage is gonna fire, and it's gonna come back home. A little different from Constellation.
A little bit.
Basically, a little bit like the lack of the gigantic Titan mega rocket that was the Ares 5, but it
Now,
does.
this
look-
would- no.
It looks very similar to Altair. Very
This
similar.
would launch on SLS Block 1B, but except the core stage would be 10 meters and the solid rocket boosters would be 5 segment. But there wouldn't be
5.5
RL10s, there'd be
segment.
J2Xs.
Dude, it's eerily similar. Like, not
It's
gonna
It's
lie.
just giving me
eerily,
Constellation
it's
vibes.
exact.
It's just giving.
Like,
Just
it
got
looks
more
they've
fuel
literally taken-
tanks.
It looks like they've taken the 3D model of the lander leg here and put it on there. Because like it's not it's like okay.
Identical.
Okay, so look at that landing leg at how it's strut. The strut on the left connects to the core landing part right there, and then the strut on the right connects beneath the strut on the left to the core landing leg, just like on the Altair. It's exactly
Yeah,
the
but
same.
I mean, like again, I will stress like these very early renders you can take them at less than face value. So yeah,
Oh,
they
I know,
obviously,
but like this,
no doubt, render
yeah.
wise, they absolutely stole that render's design.
They
Like
I mean,
absolutely.
you've got to have some. Your render can't be like
Well, yeah,
it can't be a placeholder lander and say, oh, it's just a placeholder lander now. So don't worry, we're gonna get a better
but I
one.
mean, what we've seen so far are going to be placeholders. Like what actually touches the surface of the moon is not going to look like any of those renders we've seen.
Like for all you
They're
know,
not gonna
the
look-
final
they're not gonna
version
look
could
like a
literally
completely
just
separate
be
lander.
Altair.
You know what this actually feels like? This looks like the iPhone and then the Chinese knockoff.
Yeah.
Oh,
Like, almost
you
exactly
say
the
that right
same,
as
but
China's
pretty
about to launch a
obviously.
knockoff Dragon capsule.
Oh god.
Well,
Actually,
other than
And they
ship,
even have their own knockoff Soyuz rocket and Soyuz
No,
capsule.
no wait,
It's kinda weird.
guys! I just realized where that model in near future spacecraft comes from KSP. That's a Blue Origin and CCP proposal.
Whoa.
I just realized that. You know the big one? It comes out and the angle completely changes. Maybe I'll find it later. But like now I know where that comes from. So
I know what you're talking about.
So yeah, we got Apple on the right and we got Chinese is knockoff on the left. But like they're pretty much the same, but one's obviously worse.
Like the MK3B, like from near future. Pod. Yeah.
Still with me?
No, you know how you said that we can take these things with a grain of salt? I mean, imagine if the Vivis had gotten selected and like the final lander was literally just Altair.
Right, you know that's gonna happen, right? Like they're just gonna
Actually,
say,
wait.
we're gonna take the SLS, extend the core stage by a couple meters. We're gonna extend the diameter by a couple meters, and we're gonna make a lander and call it Altair. And then we're gonna make a solid rocket booster, put a second stage on top of that, and put Orion on top of that. This has never been done before in history. We're doing completely new science here. This is not constellation. Don't at me.
Actually, what do you think the actual name of this thing would be?
Be called not Altair.
Altair. It'd be called
No,
Altair.
Altair
It'll be
2.
called Untair. Untair. That's what it'll be called. Or Antair.
Inter.
imagine if all the proposals eventually just morphed into the LEM.
It's just be like
Slowly.
the LEM, but with a descent, like a transfer.
Actually, no.
stage.
What do you imagine if like Northrop Grumman didn't join the national team, but instead proposed the LEM again?
It's like, hey guys, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean, not
Maybe-
gonna lie, though, that LEM
maybe
was
extend the
very
tank a
risky.
little
It
bit,
only
but-
had a single descent stage engine. Like, if that
Dude,
engine
that's
failed,
surprising.
they had to abort. And if that abort engine failed, they would die. So it was incredibly risky.
Actually, if you're like with the LEM, if you're like say if you just perform the deorbit burn and then you have to abort, could you still use the descent stage to get back into orbit, or would you still?
Well, yes, you can, but there's a certain point at which lighting the descent stage does not save you. That's actually, I think that someone pointed that was a point that happened with Bearsheet, is that when they were descending, they made a call out that was like we have now passed the point at which we cannot abort. So like if they were to fire their engines nonstop,
well, the
they
descent
could
stage.
not slow down the spacecraft fast enough to
Well-
get into orbit again. They would
Well,
just
just
crash.
just the descent stage engine. You can fire the ascent stage engine.
Yeah, if you fire the ascent stage, that's why NASA likes the National Lander System, is because it's the only one with an actual ascent stage.
Look, look, if on the actual LEM, if the whole thing failed, you get like disaster speech. You know, the fate has ordained that the men who went to the moon to explore in peace shall stay on the moon to rest in peace.
The man who went to the moon to explore
I'm
in
at-
peace will now stay on the moon to rest in peace.
I imagine
These
Neil Ar- I
brave
imagine
men,
if Ne-
Neil Armstrong and Edwin Aldrin, that there is no
Aldrin.
hope for the recovery. We also know that there is
Wait,
hope
guys,
for
I got it.
mankind and
I got it.
sacrifice.
next
Fate has
next slide.
ordained that the man who went to the moon to explore in peace will stay on the moon to rest in peace.
is
You know, that would be something if Like,
I mean,
if
you
that
would be
happens,
resting in
like,
pieces if, like, the ascent
Good
engine
speech.
failed and you're falling towards the ground.
You'd be pancake. A
Not
pancake.
just pancake, multiple pancakes. No, that's how you beat the like thousands of Soviet flags that Luna brought.
Gamer moment. A true gamer moment.
Except it's with American blood, American heart.
Oh boy, the
American
murder
mom.
hornets have
Oh,
arrived in America.
America.
America. Fuck yeah.
You know those giant hornets that are like the size of your hand that come from like Japan? They're now in America. We're
Oh
dead.
no.
You
Is
know,
this the end
we
of
didn't
this
think
of
March
the
May was going to get any worse.
presentation?
But, here's the giant bees that are like the size of your hand.
All right,
If we
next
want
Oh my
slide.
god,
Next
that
slide.
thing is
rating, we
gigantic.
already. If we
Next
want to keep
slide.
the PG-13
Don't worry.
rating, we already used our
We
one
already
F word.
lost the PG-13 rating when Mr. Fu started swearing like a sailor.
Change slides.
Just bleep it out.
That is
Fuck.
impossible.
Is that an exploration upper stage? You
An
gross. Going
Aries
back.
5.
An Aries 5.
Those-
I don't see no J2X.
So you know F1B.
Where's the RS-68?
Where's the 33 feet diameter core?
Where's
the Altair?
Where's
10
the Ares
tons.
4? Where's the Ares 4?
Aries 4 was god awful.
Oh,
Where's the
it
Ares
looks
3?
horrible.
No, Ares 3.
I've not
Oh
seen that
god,
one.
no.
Ares
3 is
1.5.
without the Ares 3 is Ares 4 without the boosters, and the core is not fully fueled, so the engines could actually lift it.
Oh my goodness
It's
gracious!
literally
Whose
just
idea
using
was?
You're literally just using a 10-meter core just to get at Orion into Earth orbit. Why not just use Ares 1?
Well, to be fair, I think at a 0% abort rate.
So what was Ares 2? Was there an Ares 2?
There was never an Aries 2.
So they had Ares 1, 3, 4, and 5, but they didn't have a 2?
I think Ares
didn't
2
have
probably
a
would have.
3 or a 4.
No, I
Those
think
were
Ares
just, like,
2
those
would
were
have just been the
concepts.
Ares 1 with like mini SRBs on the side.
No, it's
The Aries
it's
3
Ares
and
1
Ares
heavy.
4 weren't ever going to actually happen. They were just concepts for Constellation rockets. But like if Constellation happened with Ares 1 and Ares 5, Ares 3 and Ares 4 would be concepts that never would have occurred. Like the SLS Block 1A, it's a concept that never is going to happen.
Thing.
Actually, wait. Ares 2 would probably just be Ares 1 heavy.
Ares 2 is the Ares
It's
Ares
Ares 1
1
heavy.
core side mounted to an SRB.
SLS Block 1A is god awful.
Not really. Those F1B engines would have been epic.
No, I'm talking about the F1Bs. I'm talking about that jarring transition from the core stage diameter to the Orion diameter.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, they did it with the shuttle external fuel tank and the big old thing-a-ding right there.
Anyways, back to this. It appears that the exploration upper stage development has sped up, probably for Europa Clipper.
I don't
Europa
think Europa
Clipper
Clipper is going to
doesn't
fly on
use
a US, is it? It's going to fly on an ICPS.
Yeah, ICPS or Falcon Heavy at this point, because who the hell knows at this point? Like it is.
Well,
weird.
Falcon Heavy, if you're using that, you're going to have to wait a really long time for the transfer window. To be fair, you're going to have to wait a really long time for the SLS. So it's like, do you want to wait for the transfer or for the
Also,
rock?
to be fair, I'm pretty sure Europa Clipper is legally mandated to launch on the SLS.
But
It is, but the White
what
House
are they
is
going to? Okay. I
the
want to
White
ask you a
House and
question though.
NASA are
It's-
demanding
If
not
NASA
to.
doesn't launch it on SLS, what is the Congress going to do? Arrest NASA? Like what? What are you going to do?
You're gonna arrest
Like,
Biden.
you're under arrest.
What Congress can do, and their only real flexing power, is to defund.
But then the
They ha-
president could just like not approve that.
Oh
No.
No, the
Just
president
compare-
can't. The president can't disapprove a defund. It doesn't
Sorry,
work that way.
Sorry, never mind. Wait, but actually no. Can the
Just like a
president?
pair of handcuffs on like
Okay,
the
Never-
truss or
Can the
something.
president sign an executive order demanding Europa Clipper fly on Falcon Heavy?
Yes, he
Yeah.
can.
The president can sign whatever executive order they want, but it can still be negated by Congress.
Okay, let's just be honest. It's in our best interest that Europa Clipper flies on Falcon Heavy. We need that extra SLS for Artemis.
Okay, that's actually a good point. That's a good point. But I would love to see a cargo SLS fly. I would love to see that.
We're
awesome.
gonna be seeing a cargo SLS
I want to see any rocket
anyway.
fly. Any rocket flying is good news.
But I mean, I don't want to see like a rocket flying
Rocket flying good.
nuclear warhead on it. I don't think that'd be pretty cool.
Well, no. Then at that point, you don't classify it as a rocket. You classify it as a weapon. It's different.
ICBM.
All
I'd love to
rockets
see a
are just
V2 in action.
weapons, but weapons designed to do different things.
They just unveiled the IC. It's not the ICPS. It's the ICBM.
ICPS, ICBM. When?
ICP.
Oh no.
A nuclear
Don't-
warhead
okay,
the size of
ICPS
Orion.
or DCSS. That would make a
And
horrible
liftoff at dawn. The dawn of
ICBM.
Orion.
The dawn
Beginning
of
a new
nuclear
age of
fallout.
American space exploration.
Dawn of Orion, not the capsule, the drive.
The dawn of perpetual nuclear winter.
And liftoff.
The
at
dawn of
dawn.
me living
Dawn,
14
I
days.
think it's time for
living
next
14
slide.
days of fallout shelter.
Dawn.
The dawn of me
And
living in a
liftoff
fallout
at
shelter.
dawn, perpetual dawn, because nuclear explosions are always dawn. It causes dawn all the time,
That's
regardless
actually a
of
very
time.
good point. All the nuclear explosions in movies happen at like sunset or like sunrise.
One
That's what I
explosion
can
in
get the flag.
midday. No.
That's what I can get.
Whenever Kerbal Space Program 2 comes out and I play multiplayer, the minute I unlock the Orion drive, I'm paying a visit to my friends.
Actually, you know what? KSP2 would be a great war simulator, actually. Even more than KSP1 already.
Well, you know, unfortunately, they said that
Luke,
there's not gonna be weapons in
Can we
there.
do the next
Well,
slide?
they think we're not going to be able to create weapons with the stock.
Yeah.
parts they
How
have.
many? How many?
Not
We
when
got?
they-
I
not
didn't.
without-
I
not
didn't
when
see
they
John
add
slides
attached
before
to a
they're
stack
released.
It's
separator.
gonna be 2 hours on the stream soon.
Gamer
SP
moment.
Yeah.
KSP2's just got KSP weapons are basically just stack separators attached to separatrons.
Okay, let's just rapid fire through this.
Okay,
so
Hubble
We'll
30
take anniversary. It's 30 years old. We screwed up the mirror the
Oh,
first time, so we
Hubble.
repaired it. So activate
Yup,
Windows.
yup.
Activate Windows.
Hubble.
all right, next slide.
No.
Next
No.
slide.
What? You just want a next
Yep.
Hubble 30th? What?
No,
What?
no.
No, we gotta see the back.
The back.
How could you
Okay, actually, no,
next?
we should
How
respect
could you
Hubble.
next
We should give
Hubble?
some respect. We should give some respect to the Hack telescope.
Okay, 30 seconds of silence. Okay, a moment of silence for Hubble. 30 seconds.
Now, see, so okay, so
Not
You interrupted the
if we
silence.
no, because if we
1
take
second
30
for
seconds
every
of silence
year.
and we go to the next slide, we'll never continue talking about Hubble. If we take what Hubble has done and you forward that to what we want JWST to do,
If
I'm
it
like
ever does it at this point.
right at this point, like I'm getting super freaking nervous for JWST, not just from like an admin standpoint, but like when it actually launches. I don't know if I can watch that launch. Like
Ariane 5 is gonna fail. It's gonna fail. I'm calling it. The Ariane 5 is
come
going
on.
to fail. I'm calling
Look,
it.
it
Launch
now.
only,
Ariane
works,
5?
it only works when I say a starship's gonna fail. It only works. It only does it.
Okay, here, David. Let me.
It's not. Gonna,
Yeah,
it's
that's
not-
why I
okay,
have to
look,
tell you.
It doesn't
to
work
shut
like
the
that
hell up
because
on
you know,
Twitter.
actually, Ariane 5 is incredibly reliable, isn't it? It's got like
Extremely
almost
reliable,
100
yeah.
flights with one failure.
Yeah.
2 failures.
2 failures. What was the second failure?
Two, but okay, but what was the second failure? So what?
No, there was 2 catastrophic failures and there were 2 failures.
Okay.
Yeah, it's extremely reliable. The Ariane 5. Fine.
Yeah. Okay. Now remember the time all the way back when James Webb was supposed to launch on an SLS.
Yeah, long fucking
Okay.
time ago.
Okay. Hold up. So Ariane 5 is like a huge downgrade from SLS. How on earth is that capable of doing it if they thought they needed SLS in the first place?
They didn't.
Well,
they didn't.
they
They
wanted
never
the
thought they needed
spectacle.
SLS.
No,
It
I
was.
think
It
you
was a
mean
way of
Louvois.
justifying.
I
it was,
think you're talking about Louvois.
well, even Louvois is still the same mass
just
generally
big
as
James Webb
JWST.
Telescope.
No, Louvois is bigger. Louvois is
It's
apparently
volumetrically
JPL
bigger,
is
but
saying-
LaVoir
JPL wants to stay on
is
Starship
just
now, so
James Webb Space Telescope with chonk applied.
yeah, chonkometer.
Okay, next slide.
Happy 30th to Hubble. Thank you for your service. Okay,
Okay,
Peter.
look at this
Peter!
chadstickle. This is a chadstickle.
This is cool. Okay, this should be a lunar. Rocket Lab should make a lunar lander out of this. They should.
Well, no, because they're going to be using this stage to launch lunar landers, like the
No, but like derive this into a lunar lander. So you have the lunar lander on top,
Okay, but you
and then you
have
got
to,
this on the bottom of it, and then you got the rest of the Electron.
they should propose this to Clips.
They should.
Learning
Bruh,
all the acronyms.
once Artemis hardware starts to fly, it's gonna be insane. Right now is
Yeah.
the calm before the storm.
Definitely.
And
Then-
not only that, it's using basically every single launch pad at the Cape. It's using 39A, 39B, 41,
MB's Falcon.
30, and I think what was it, 36 for New Glenn?
Look, I want to
think- I
see
think
all of
we
those
have-
rockets on the launch pad at the same time one day. Just fly a drone over, hope you don't get hit by a bird or a stray SRB or something.
A
Yeah,
stray
and
SRB,
on top of that,
a
maybe
challenger moment.
on top of that, maybe you can get Electron from you can get Wallops, New Zealand, and Boca Chica.
Oh yeah, Boca Chica. Oh, I'm gonna pay a visit to Boca Chica if I can sometime.
I really should.
Mm.
It'd be awesome.
Sneak on set, sneak
Okay,
on, take a piece of
so
aluminum from the
update,
hopper.
Everyday astronaut said, "Oh my God, this is beautiful." So okay, so quick, what can we send to the surface of the moon, referring to this photon? Peter Beck replied, "Forget the moon. Let's go to Venus."
Yeah, Pierre Beck loves Venus.
What?
Pierre Beck thinks Venus is a really good place to go. Like
Venus is honestly like
the
It's
clouds
Our
of Venus are
crusher.
good.
if we're looking
Our
for
crusher.
closest analog.
Oh,
34
definitely.
Clouds of
miles up
Venus
in
are
the
good.
Venusian
The
atmosphere
surface
the
is
closest
terrible.
analog to Earth surface level conditions in anywhere in the solar system.
Venus is kind of
Well, only for not if you're talking chemically, only if you're talking like
temperature.
The
atmospheric
pressure, the
density.
temperature.
Atmospheric,
It's all
not even
very-
pressure. Atmospheric density, yes, but not pressure.
Yeah, pressure.
Gravity.
Gravity's
Okay,
good.
actually no. You got compared. So Venus has its atmosphere is 90 times that of Earth. Mars it's
Right.
100th. So that means Venus's atmosphere is closer multiple to Earth's than Mars's.
Okay, but like if we're gonna be real,
If
Titan
that's
has
the
most,
one metric
most
you're looking at.
analogous Earth atmosphere there is, with its nitrogen atmosphere, just like Earth, and it's like 1.5 times the size of Earth's, which is incredibly
Screw
similar.
Mars. Screw Venus. Let's go
Titan
to
is
Titan.
just insanely similar to Earth, like
Fl-
really similar.
Just bring some oxidizer, set Titan on fire, and if
Let's
we're
not
lucky,
do
then we'll
that,
get.
though. Like let's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
do that.
Except it can't
about
do
no?
that. It doesn't work like that.
Just have like a reverse flamethrower that uses an
You could
oxidizer
light
instead of
up all
fuel.
the oceans on fire if you had enough oxidizer.
Imagine Elon Musk land, like he actually goes to Titan himself on his own starship. He lands, he sets up his camera to have his 4K live stream back to Earth. He takes out his Boring Company flamethrower, he lights it, and then the camera cuts off. Then you get quick shot to Hubble, which is pointing at Titan, and Titan just lights up.
And then Elon
It's like
died.
a Viking funeral, but worse.
Yeah, that's the only way Elon Musk can go out. It's dying in the flames of Titan.
What if instead the starship carried a payload that just carried some oxidizer with it?
What if?
Is oxidizer.
What if-
Like a nuclear
guys-
weapon on Titan is literally just a bottle of oxygen.
Yeah.
Basically.
Like no joke on Titan. Its atmosphere is so incredibly similar to Earth. Earth's atmosphere is like 75%, no, 78%, right? 78% nitrogen. Titan's is 98% nitrogen. Like that is incredibly similar.
The
thought
only
it was
difference,
actually-
like,
In
actually,
fact,
if you swapped out the
if
I'm
there
pretty sure
were
if you
no
swapped out
plants
the
on
methane
Earth,
for
I
oxygen,
think
it
the
would
Earth's
be
atmosphere
breathable
would be
over at
mainly
Titan.
nitrogen because of the.
Woog, do you want to
the
go to the
one
next
that-
slide?
Actually,
Slide.
okay,
yeah.
what else is in the atmosphere? Is it just nitrogen?
Okay, Titan's atmosphere
methane?
consists 98% of nitrogen. There's methane gas in there as well, and some carbon monoxide.
Oh,
Yeah, it's just nitrogen, methane, and hydrogen mostly.
so
Okay, let's move on.
So replace all that methane with oxygen and replace like
You're
one
still
to
dead.
one.
You're
Replace
very,
that.
very
You
dead.
could probably
because
breathe
it's only
it.
going to be 2% the amount of oxygen that we have here on Earth. Like that's nothing. That's nothing. You're not gonna live even if you replace every gas
Woog,
station
let's move on.
with oxygen. You're still gonna die.
Guys,
Move
let's
on.
move
Woog. Next slide, please.
Oh god.
Anyways, RS-25's Borger said it was bad. I don't like Borger because he's a burger.
But
Anyways,
Borger was
bad.
right. Borger was right here. He was exactly
How?
right. Like spot on.
No,
it was
he's
too
not, though.
expensive.
The RS-25 is extremely expensive, but that's because it's
It's a
reusable
godly engine.
It's a
Godly
reusable
engine.
engine, so it like the cost just gets distributed over all those missions. So for that it'd be cheap, but instead now you're
Like
using
we're
it
doing
only
smart
once.
reuse.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
see,
So
here's
that's
the
why smart
problem
reuse
with
makes
that,
sense
David.
for SLS.
The RS-25E, its only purpose is to be cheaper to fly than the RS-25D. So if you're going to make the RS-25E and it isn't cheaper than the RS-25D, you're just going to keep using the D. So the fact that they're making the E means it's going to eventually be cheaper than the D, or else they wouldn't even be making it.
Well,
So
exactly.
That's
It's
true.
gonna be
eventually the E
cheaper,
is
but
going
the
to be
thing is,
cheaper.
it's not gonna be that much cheaper. Like
But it's still going to
33%,
be
I think, is the
cheaper
number I've heard.
than
Like
the D.
that's still significant, but it's still extremely expensive.
Well, because all rocket engines are expensive. Like everything
The
in
Merlin
rocketry is
is
expensive.
the Merlin is like $500,000.
Only $500,000. I could buy my house with that money.
I need
Did you
a
buy
million
your
to
house
buy
with
a
that
house.
money?
I could.
I need a million. to
Okay,
I could
buy a
buy
house.
my own
regardless,
house.
well, okay,
I
the
could buy the house I
RS-25
live in
is
right now
super
with that much.
expensive. The RS-25 is super expensive as far as rocket engines go.
Oh, definitely.
only
But
that
it's a
expensive
great
because
engine,
it's
though.
so complex.
It's a great engine, but that's because you can use it multiple times.
No, it is not just because you can use it multiple
Well,
times.
How many
that's part
ignitions
of
does this
it.
thing have?
That's
It's
part of what makes the
insane.
cost
It
worth
is.
it. That's
I don't think many people realize just how insane the RS-25 engine is. Like this thing is. It's utterly insane what it's able to accomplish.
Basically, a closest thing to an atmosphere compensating engine that we have. I mean, that's how godly
It's
the
like
RS-25
if an
is.
Aerospike was actually like a real engine, this is better than an Aerospike.
How? Well, how did they get that to work though? Is it like a plugged nozzle or something?
I think there's a lip at the end that sort of curves in, if I
by
remember
the way,
correctly,
guys, look at the
that
Michaelis
sort of
chat.
directs it so
look
that
at what
there's no way
supposed-
it can
these
like
are space
detach
these
from
are
the
spacesuit
chamber wall.
patents. These are spacesuit patents in the Michaelis chat.
What?
In the Michaelis chat, I just posted some old like spacesuit patents.
Looks like something I'd see at McDonald's. Looks like a McDonald's character from the 90s.
Oh my gosh, I remember those. Those were the original proposals for a human suit. Have you seen the Time magazine that has that at the cover?
No,
It's so
actually.
Oh, they look green,
we
but
should move
they're
on.
so like.
Okay then.
Let's hope we can get that thing.
Yay! Another delay.
Well, to be fair, this happened
This
because
is like 90%
they've been
COVID.
pausing work for like a few months.
Like, okay,
As long
screw,
as they get the
screw
dry
s-
run.
Okay, you know what? Screw the name Senate launch system. Just delay launch system. Like it doesn't. The Senate doesn't even matter at this point.
DLS.
It's just delay launch system.
DLS.
It's how we're gonna get the Senate to actually function.
I mean, we barely have a government as it stands right now. So, like, literally, the only people we have in the government right now is Pelosi, Trump, and Fauci.
Okay, we're getting political. Let's not go there.
No politics.
Okay.
You could argue all day about
I demand
politics,
that
but
we stop getting political in this chat.
All right.
politics is a different podcast.
Okay, we're stopping.
Okay,
It's
We're
a
stopping.
podcast.
We're stopping.
Okay, so I do get, why, after a while it gets a bit annoying with all these delays, but to be fair, this time it wasn't on any fault of its own. It was just due to them literally not working on it at all because of the coronavirus.
So it
On
basically was like it was sort of an anything
Is
happens
this
to
the
like
last
go wrong.
slide?
It's unacceptable, but it's better than a human caused delay in a way.
Yeah, I mean,
So it is. It's still.
Hopefully, when
but
they open it back up,
Guys,
the
Zach
second
wants to
wave
know if
doesn't
he can
come.
join the podcast.
Tell
he
them
can
it's
join.
almost over.
Okay.
Should we move on?
Yeah,
move
sure.
on. Like, we're trying to finish here.
Should we skip the DM2 thing?
No, that's incredibly important. The first
No, we have
return
to
of
do
human
DMT.
spaceflight to the American astronauts, American rockets,
American rockets
soil.
from
We
American
can't miss
soil.
Bridenstine.
Bridenstine.
Do you know that
Biden.
launch? I don't care if it's in the
Bridenstine
middle of the
Bears.
night portal. I am gonna get up. It's like
Soil.
when that launches, I don't care when it is.
Okay,
I'm gonna make
So
sure I'm
actually, I
awake.
I
to watch
posted
it.
these words earlier in the day in the chat. I think it's the Union has broken and it has been punctured by the flames of the dragon, because Soyuz is Russian for Union. So the Union has been broken. It has been punctured by dragon flame.
This will be the
Gamer
first launch of American astronauts from American soil since 2011.
American rockets.
Tweeting during this.
American
astronauts, American rocket, American soil.
Launching on American astronauts, launching on
damn it.
American astronauts, launching on American astronauts, launching on American astronauts, launching on American astronauts, launching on American soil.
Basically, just gonna get up on a
American rockets
human
launching on
chain to the. It's like gonna be like the space elevator, but human bodies.
American soil launching on American astronauts.
American
launching from
soil launching on
American
American astronauts, launching on American rockets. No, American rockets launching on American rockets on American rockets.
Ooh,
on
maybe
American
we should
rockets,
move on.
American rockets on American rockets on American rockets on American rockets on American
American
rockets on American rockets on American soil.
They're gonna complete the world's longest game of capture the flag when it docks to the station.
Actually, no. It's American astronauts on
American
Russian rockets,
astronauts.
Russian soil.
American astronauts on American rockets on American soil.
Woog.
American astronauts on Russian rockets, Russian soil.
Of Russian astronauts on the Russian rockets on Russian soil. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. That was good. That was a
Thank you.
good accent.
I get that from my common.
Okay, so conclusion. Here we would just wrap things up.
All right. Now you can talk. Now you can rant about Starship.
No, beep, beep. I don't really care. I
Okay,
wish.
then.
This is so frustrating. This is
Okay,
very
end the
frustrating.
podcast. End the podcast. Bye, everybody.
What?
Bye-bye.
We haven't done
I'll
our
see you in
outro yet. We
episode
haven't done our
3.
signature outro.
See ya at episode 3.
And as we leave the moon, we leave as we came, and God willing, as we shall return.